So today we are reviewing SHADOWSPACE by Karsten Rossner, and this is a space opera game that's very compatible with Shadowdark, and we'll get started right after the intro. Hi folks, and welcome to Sharp Mountain Games. Here we talk about group role-playing games, solo role-playing games, and there are plenty of actual plays in the playlist. You can check out our print and PDF products at Amazon, Lulu, Drive-Thru, and Roll20, and they're all linked below. Let's get started, and we're glad you're here. So today I'm reviewing SHADOWSPACE by Karsten Rossner, which is basically a Star Wars space opera type game based on Shadowdark, and he does give credit for the Shadowdark people. I should say this, it's a complete game. You don't need to purchase Shadowdark to play this, although he certainly gives credit for, where he got the ideas for the mechanics. One other thing just to get right out of the way, he does use some AI art throughout here just to enhance it. And I'll be very direct, I'm internet friends or YouTube friends with Karsten here, and I know he's not an artist himself, but he still wanted to provide visuals, of course, for his books and stuff. So if AI is a deal breaker for you, hey, there's a lot of other great videos out there on YouTube. So this is a D20 rollover system. You have target numbers and you add your ability modifier. It has advantage and disadvantage, exactly like you'd expect from a D20 game. Critical hits and critical failures. And that's good because if you want to run a Star Wars game or a Star Trek game, you could use it for Star Trek, I think, very easily, or any sort of space opera. I think it make it very easy for your group to say, hey, look, you're familiar with, D&D type rules. Come on over. This is going to be very easy. Let's give this a try for the evening. And your characters are created with 3d4 plus 6, so they're a little bit more powerful maybe than like if you just do 3d6 down the line. Standard, straight up dexterity, constitution, intelligence, all the normal abilities that you normally would expect. Now, you're going to be a little bit more powerful, so your rolls are going to be between 9 and 18. You could always use a different method for generating your ability scores if you like, or use a standard score spread. Everything, whatever you're doing in another game, if you prefer, you can do that. You get 3 trained skills, and this I really like. Your trained skills don't add another modifier. You just roll with advantage on your abilities modifier. Keeps it nice and easy. Really nice and easy here. And then you get some special features and some talents, and we'll talk about that later. And that way, if you want to play something like a Wookiee or a Jedi type, you can. But of course, he doesn't call them Wookiee and Jedi because he doesn't want Disney's lawyers coming after him. There's no need for that. So here's our chart with our ability modifiers. Nothing brand new there, and you get your HP. So let's go a little bit further down here for the skills. So again, if you're skilled, you roll with advantage. And here's the list of skills and where you might use them. Nice, clean, all on one page. And not surprising, piloting, athletics, thievery. So this is going to let you really hone in, or perception, like a Jedi type might take perception, security systems, stealth. I think it's a pretty standard science fiction list. I may even borrow it for some of my own writing. There was a little bit of AI art there. And now your special features, you get 2 special features. So these are things that I think really help you not only mechanically, but role-playing, like friends in low places. So you might be the person who can, find some resources if you're in a kind of a crummy place like Mos Eisley. Spacer's Luck, where you get a little bit of extra luck for a reroll. Highly skilled, you get an extra trained skill. Weapons expert, things like that. So there's some features here. They're not really like feats. They're just more add things to your character. Then you get your species trait. So if you want to play a non-human species, it says you can select one of the species traits. So if you want to be a Wookiee, you want to be tough. So what it's doing is allowing you to kind of build your own. It's a really do-it-yourself approach. But he keeps the lists kind of tight. So that's good. So you're not overwhelmed with a bazillion choices in a game kind of like GURPS or something like that. Hulking, again, if you're a really big brute, you might take that. Natural armor, maybe if you're a lizard-like character. Amphibious, in case you want to holler, it's a trap a lot. Or you can breathe and swim under the water. A focused mind, so a mystic monk, as they're called here. which of course is a type of Jedi, sort of, would take that focused mind. Now, the talents table here kind of lets you, like especially if you're human, I believe humans get 2 talents. You can start to really customize. Are you good in melee? Are you, wear a lot of armor like the Mandalorian kind of character? Are you psionic? So it gives you a little bit extra bonuses to bump up your character. So characters are going to be kind of heroic in here, which I don't think is a bad thing, especially it mimics Star Wars. And even in, like I said, in Star Trek, you're playing the best of the best. And you level up, so you gain 1d6 hit points, just pretty standard. I think it keeps things nice and easy. And like I said, this is a classless system, so you're kind of building your own, I don't say you're building your own class, but you're building your own character the way you want to. And then on odd levels, you gain another talent or roll on the hero's talent if you prefer to do it randomly. And it says the maximum level you can reach is 10. And some people might say, oh, why can't you go up to 20? You're not going to go up to 20. Just realistically, is your game going to run that long? And even if you get to level 10, well, then maybe it's time to start over again with some new characters. Or just keep playing the level 10 characters if you want. You could certainly add to this. All right, combat, nothing spectacular here. He uses an I go, you go setup, which, in fact, I just used last night in my the Star Trek game that I was running, and it works just fine. It works absolutely just fine, and I believe you can hold your action. Attacks and damage and everything is exactly like you'd expect. And when you reach 0, you have to roll, and you get a death timer, which is a how many rounds you'll die unless you get some medical check. And I like that. I think that's nice because if one of your companions is down, now you got to make a choice. Do you get somebody with a medicine skill or a med pack over? You have to make a choice and try. Look, hey, we got to get out of combat now. We got to get away from these people. So it keeps everything from being a simple hack and slash and all the way to the death. So I like that for the death option here. Then there's some healing. Again, you rest all night, you gain your hit points back. That's very Shadowdark, and I think that's very 5e is the same thing. And there's some different actions, things you want to do in combat. Then you have your weapons, armor, and gear. Gear slots, strength ability, score, or 10. So, how much you can carry if you want to keep track of that. I don't know if I would in a game I'm doing it, but absolutely it's there. And then weapons, and how much damage do they do? And the beam sword, of course, acts as kind of the lightsaber. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Armor adds to your armor class exactly like you'd expect. But if you're starting to get into medium and heavy armor, you can't swim in that. I really like to swim. I can't swim in armor. That's crazy. So if you're really trying to bump up your AC, like heavy armor and things like that, you are going to have a disadvantage on athletic tests and swimming, and stealth, which I think is very reasonable. And then other common gear and starships. So starships, what they do, let me just click ahead to an example. Here's a good one, the Never Too Late, which is kind of a Millennium Falcon type. So you can have a bonus to your speed, your handling. So those are bonuses that would add to the pilot's ability in combat. Shields would add to armor class. And armor class, it's kind of like with a person, kind of a player character, where you add the handling from the ship, but also then the pilot's stat modifier. So if they can, if they're especially good at piloting, then that sort of acts as their dodging. And you get a few kind of standard like destroyers and let me go back, Dagger class starfighters. That'd be like your X-Wing. They're all in here. And then Starship Combat works very similar to player combat, exactly like you'd think, but with some differences. So the pilot could take evasive maneuvers, which then helps give them an AC bonus. The pilot could fire the guns, like if you're in a small starfighter, an X-Wing, or a TIE fighter, and operate the sensors if you have a gunner, you might want to operate the sensors to give them advantage, like a co-pilot on their next shot. And there's stuff for a co-pilot to do, and there's stuff for an engineer to do. So to try and keep more and more people involved in the starship combat, not just the pilot. Now, you don't have to keep track of all that with NPCs. Just like any NPC, they just fly and attack, and you don't need to do all that crazy stuff. And, of course, there's different scale. A small X-Wing isn't going to go up against a Star Destroyer and win. It's just probably not likely. And he gives some chase rules. Yeah, movement and chase if you want to escape. Like I said, I'm not going to go through every single thing here. And now we're getting to some of the good stuff. If you want to generate a random space sector, he tells you how to do that. And then you can roll to start to put in different planets there. Is it a farming planet or an urban sprawl like Coruscant? Devastated by war. I've used this because this Devastated by War in one of my games, because that's really nice. You can have like almost like space dungeons, or local beasties hiding in there, or outlaws might hide out here. A mining colony, heavy industry. So you're rolling this. I believe there's 12 here. So you roll a D12, and then he has a page to give you an idea, scientific research of some different places you might go. And, of course, my favorite, the unremarkable dump. So that's kind of like Tatooine. Mos Eisley is an unremarkable dump. Now, psionics. Here's how, quote-unquote, the Force works. But he doesn't call it the Force, but psionics. And psionics has been around a long time. So you could use this for Jedi-type characters. I think you could also use it for some of the psionic powers of a Vulcan or the Beta Z, where they can read minds. And there's 3. There's Affect, Perceive, and Channel. And they're linked to different stats. So Affect is, Luke trying to grab the lightsaber from the Wampa's lair or things like that. Or Vader trying to crush someone's windpipe with unseen force. That's what you'd roll there. Perceive is kind of, telling things. So I'm thinking of Deanna Troi being able to detect the emotions of another character or locate living beings. Oh, you could also use it to look into the future. Always in motion, the future is. So be careful with that one. Now, and channel is to control the energy in your own body. So when the Jedi make those super jumps and those super dashes to get out of the way, they can do things like that. Now, the way you do have to roll for these. So this is interesting. The way to determine the difficulty class is you decide, well, what do you want it to do? So, okay, I want to use channel to absorb some energy. If I want to only absorb D4 worth of energy, I'll roll a D4 and see how much. That's a difficulty class of 9. If I want to absorb D8, so like a big blaster bolt or something, that's a DC of 15. Might not be able to do that until later levels. So there's no list of specific psionic powers. I'm thinking of the old West End game Star Wars. I'm not knocking it, but they had a lot of powers, kind of like having a huge spell list. This is a little bit more freeform, kind of what do you want to do, and then the DM or the game master will decide. And then there is a recharge. You can use it until you fail, but then once you fail, you can't use it until you have a rest, a particular power. And especially if it's a critical fail. And then the orders of the wielders. So we get the mystic monks, who are, again, they're the Jedi with the serial numbers filed off, but they have a disadvantage that they are hunted by the Empire or the Imperium, or however you want to do that. And if you wanted to play in an earlier era of Star Wars, go right ahead. And then they're not necessarily hunted. They might be more like the police force. And then the Dark Acolytes are people on the dark side. And this is interesting, too, because they use the beam sword, and the beam swords provide a +2 bonus to AC. And I believe the Mystic Monks get that, too. Yes, they do. So they get a bonus to their AC, which I'm thinking is, you see in the movies where they're using the lightsaber to deflect the blaster bolts. And then we get into the NPC gallery. And what you just saw was a couple images of Karsten's characters, Nash Duncan, that you can check on his channel. I'll make sure to link both to Shadowspace and his channel down below. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. So you get your shock troopers, your stormtroopers, and your military officers, your dark acolyte, So those are, your Kylo Ren or your Darth Vader or whichever era you prefer. Assassins, operatives, scoundrels, gunslingers, and bounty hunters, etc. Street thugs, combat robots. And then there's some pictures here if you want to use those as reference or as thoughts. And then he talks about, how to do a generic NPC. A lot of those you could probably also just do on the fly. And then the next page is just the indicia, the copyright information. So let me go back to the first page and wrap this up. So this is Shadowspace. You can get it very reasonably on Amazon. The link is below. It's by Karsten Rossner, who is also solo spelunking here on YouTube. And he has so many great solo RPG videos, a lot of solo Star Wars, a lot of solo fantasy and such, and even a solo post-apocalyptic, a solo kind of superhero game. So please check it out. Check out his channel. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching.